Some games really want you to work to be strong, but other games, they're built around the cathartic chaos of just being an unkillable wall of death. Hi folks, it's Mac, and today we have 18 games that let you be the boss. First off, we have Atlas Fallen. This probably wasn't the game you were expecting to start on. It's not what I would call a big over-the-top power fantasy boss game, but it does have a little of that DNA, just a bit. It's in the full-size environments that you're gliding through and the huge enemies. The whole game just makes you feel big, you know? It's awesome, and you do ascend to a godlike form in the story. But the strange thing is, the powers seem to feel less epic the more you get them. I don't know how they manage that, but combat tends to feel really floaty, especially at the start, and the story just doesn't sell how awesome you are. It's the first few levels of a game where you eventually get godlike powers, and speaking metaphorically, of course. All power, no fantasy. It's one of a few games on our list that comes with a caveat that it's best played with a buddy. Atlas Fallen is a little janky and the gameplay gets tiresome fast, so it's just better to be screwing around online with a friend. Even with those issues, it's still one of the more recent games that scratch the boss itch. The huge sandworm you're surfing through the desert is peak boss, while the rest isn't exactly jaw-dropping. If we're talking that early part of a game where you're just starting to become overpowered, it's appropriate. Coming in next is Evil West. Here's another kind of flawed gem of a game where you are very clearly the biggest and baddest dude in the room at all times. Your titanic fists do most of the talking, but you're not exactly defenseless when you run into a gunfight either. You not only pump critters full of holes with your revolver and lever action rifle, but you've got a giant electrified gauntlet to whoop somebody with too. Your evil hunting, vampire killing cowboy always feels like an intimidating presence going from one linear beat 'em up level to the next. Now, to be clear, that's a design problem, but not an awesome problem. I personally seriously enjoyed this game. I like it more than I dislike it. The combat is pretty repetitive, throws you into too many one-room arenas, and the levels are super linear, so it is kind of limiting boss play. I do like it though. It's the full package though, like the gameplay, the writing, the voice acting, the cutscenes. It all feels like a throwback in kind of a way. A lot of people have been wanting to relive these days, but playing it long enough, well, you realize sometimes there's a reason games stop being like this. I suppose not all the things that are in this game need to be attached to stopping. I think actually quite a few elements of it didn't need to stop, and I enjoyed this game quite a bit. But no matter where you stand on this game in particular, the power of this cowboy is undeniable.
The Jedi! Point taken! I don't want to die here!
Moving to number 16, it's Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. You're a Jedi, so that's automatically some boss points. You got a lightsaber, you got force powers, and wall running, super athletic fighting moves. At the start, you're getting pushed around by the narrative, or getting ganged up on by stormtroopers, kind of feeling like a pushover Jedi rather than a badass. But by the end of the first game, you're probably feeling like you're ready to take on the whole Empire yourself. By the time you get all your moves, a couple health upgrades for Cal, and a few extra healing canisters for BD1, you're basically an unstoppable force of nature. You've officially outclassed any AT-ST and probe droid the game can throw at you, with the bosses being the only real threat left. The basic gameplay loop might feel like a traditional action game, but the boss execution animations are pure power trip. You can literally stop in front of their faces and they'll tippy-toe around you, firing ineffectually in your general direction, because they know they should at least make an effort to pretend they don't know they're about to die. Like, as much as the bosses in this game love kicking my face and throwing me into walls, it doesn't matter. You beat the game, and you got another scientifically engineered horror perfect Jedi killer waiting for you in the next room. And it goes down in like 4 hits. You officially count as scary enough to interrupt gameplay for. Up next, we have Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor. This might be unexpected for some folks. It's a very grounded looking game. You'd expect maybe another nameless, boring guy with a sword and a bow for this writing, but no, that's definitely not what it is. It's a game that seriously rewards skilled play, from the meta layer of leadership mechanics in the Nemesis system, where orcs bump each other off to see who gets promoted to look cooler for the Lord of the Rings, to the incredible combat mechanics that allow you to take down entire armies by your lonesome. It's such a satisfying game to eventually feel like a boss in. What's unusual is that it's not necessarily a scheme of ever-increasing upgrades and power-ups. The game gives you substantial power, if not all your powers very early on. It's just getting those combat situations where you can go full blast that sometimes takes a bit of work. But the Nemesis system lets you customize your own brand of chaos, and Shadow of Mordor, while the excellent base, is really just a teaser for the full boss experience in its sequel, Shadow of War. Several times bigger, chaos cranked up to 11 and letting you command full forces of underling orcs to attack fortresses and stuff. Shadow of Mordor is the average player's way into being a boss. It's meant for everybody. It's a little slower pace, but you still get to be an absolute badass by the end.
How does this lock work? Ah, clever.
Next on the list, it's Dishonored 2. Like, to be clear, there's a big difference between bosses that give you huge powers to play with and bosses that make the game so easy that it's boring. And Dishonored is a franchise that's fully on the give you powers side. These immersive sim games are all about exploration, creativity, consequence, and giving players cool toys to play with, which makes a great fit for this idea. At first glance, the playable characters Corvo and Emily might not seem like they qualify as bosses. They're just sneaky infiltrators keeping their heads down, taking out guards one at a time, not especially scaring. At least in the first game. In the second game, they are given a significant upgrade. Feels way more complex when you're playing it. Plus, the missions are big enough to let you get away with a lot of extra noise and disruption. If you play the game the intended way, you're overpowered, but not quite a boss. You're meant to hide and avoid direct confrontation, but because of how the game works, you're given a lot of tools and powers and ways to break the game. You can just stop time and cut everybody down if you got caught. There's just, I'm gonna say it, there's tons of fun ways to break Dishonored, and it feels awesome to do so. You have to carefully pick your targets, plan your escape routes carefully. Set up a world where you can maintain the illusion of being a sneaky crook in a world controlled by guys who could even begin to count how many weird powers you are. Coming in next, of course, I do have to mention Prototype. Actually, any of the two Prototype games. I mean, it's a man in a hoodie running around an open world. Where have you heard that before? But this time he's got a big knife arm. This is no ordinary man in a hoodie. He's an unstoppable force that can tear buildings apart with a thought and transform into any person he's randomly met on the street. There's all this built-in contextual stuff that happens when you steal people's identities, but I'd be damned if I ever actually stopped long enough to figure out what's really going on in those games. Prototype is all about absolutely cutting loose and just doing whatever stupid little punishment they tell me to do. Little check marks, at least in the base game. Like, I'm not thinking too hard about the objectives, I'm just there for the mass destruction. On paper, Prototype really delivers on being a crazy boss nonsense, not to mention that the final stage unlocks full-on armor mode, which turns the player into a tank boss with hefty defense at the cost of agile and acrobatic moves. In reality, the game still feels like some of the lowest budget games on this list. Controls are kinda clunky, movement isn't as fun as either Infamous or Crackdown. If you're going to throw those in the same kind of genre, Prototype is basically a group project of a game. It doesn't really excel at any one thing in particular. Audio glitches all over the place in terms of like the beat 'em up stuff. Again, can go on and on about it. That's not really what we're here for. We're here for the mindless destruction and those types of boss powers. So it is a boss game. Since I've already mentioned Infamous, next up we have Infamous Second Son. Now here's another open world game that lets you break the rules, but you know you can't really make a list without an Infamous. Infamous series is built around the idea of giving players wild-ass powers. Especially if you go full bad guy, your powers stop caring about collateral damage and you just got all weapons out, super killing whoever gets lucky enough to be between you and whoever else you were gonna kill initially. In the third game, Second Son, you can really feel the stop-and-go nature of the boss's playstyle. You jump into rooftops in a burst of neon while spraying bullets all over the damn place, sometimes stopping to focus your powers and then completely cancel plans. One of the big mechanics is switching powers, so if you get bored of punching dudes with magic, now's the time to start flying and min-firing lasers with your forehead or whatever. It's all pretty awesome, and it's a fun open world to discover and experiment in. It loses a little bit of boss power because of the story and all the moral choice stuff kinda diluting how great it feels to punch bad guys in and take colors. You're still awesome in this game. You're climbing the boss hill, and Second Son really makes you feel being a boss. You eventually get even cooler, but the game does end, and you're back to being a normal person who gets to talk about these awesome games. And let's be clear, Second Son does make you feel like your main problem is biting off more than you can chew. It's not necessarily like just chewing everything up, you're not God. Coming in next, we have Control. So this one's a bit of an odd pick. As you know, it doesn't have the bombast of the previous entry. Whenever you're just walking around the Federal Bureau of Control and looking at the storytelling, you're very much meant to internalize the overwhelming sense of confusion and helplessness. And it doesn't necessarily stop by the time you've figured out what's going on either. Control never really gives you the kind of silly acceleration and speed momentum a lot of the games I've previously mentioned do love to throw at players, but it does give you one big important power that makes you feel overpowered in the best way possible. And that's the power of telekinesis. No more scavenging around for bullets or using your fists and bats to kill enemies. No, your weapon is whatever's in your line of sight and you can just rip it off the walls and throw it at dudes. I mean, it's one of my personal favorite powers in any game. They do a really good job with it here. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. You can absorb the power of the Federal Bureau of Control in what's called the oldest house that eventually gets you flight. And flying, of course, is one of those otherworldly boss fantasy powers that just feels sometimes hard to beat. But it is one of the best. I completely understand why a lot of games save it for late game powers or just avoid it altogether. I mean, flying also makes you feel invincible in ways that most games find it tough to account for. But Control is one of those bosses where flying doesn't actually make you that much harder of a target while clearing the path ahead in a more dramatic and incredible way. Control stealth makes you feel incredibly strong and right at the same time playing to Remedy Games' strong storytelling, creating the world that rewards you for exploration. At number 10, it's Batman Arkham Knight. This one's at number 10 because the character is a boss. Pretty much everyone knows it without you doing much. You're the goddamn Batman. You make the bad guys run away. You're stealthy, dark, hidden in the night. But everyone generally is aware of how much a presence you are in the world of Arkham City and how scared they should be of you. It's more a game about cultivating the aura of being a boss for the weaklings and underlings all over the place. When you're in one of the actual encounters that matter, you're not quite an unstoppable force of nature. And it's not just because there are special enemies who short out your gadgets, making those encounters monumentally frustrating. The real challenge, of course, is Gotham City's supervillains, obviously. Amongst the rogues gallery of Arkham Knight are a long line of the most powerful people in the city, masterminds and madmen who are prepared to deal with you. What's a little different with a lot of the entries is how this offers a palate cleanser. You go from boss to underdog in a kind of unusual sense, between traditional beat-em-up sneaking around to the puzzle boss fights where the only answer is, well, you're not sure. And yes, Batman is obviously a boss, but there are sometimes way more powerful bosses in this one. Something in particular that the newest Batman game, Gotham Knights, I mean it's Arkham without Batman and doesn't quite really translate. Makes for a tough comparison between the two and you're playing them back to back. Next up at number 9, it's Ghost of Tsushima. Jin Sakai is one of the most boss characters on this list, and a welcome addition. Watching him develop from the start of a game's narrative, like I said with other entries, that matters. You're starting off as an unsure survivor of an invasion on the island he's the caretaker of, and you're ending as a mature vision of what the future of the samurai will be. Let's be clear, we're using samurai here loosely. Over the course of the game's very traditional follow-the-wind markers, killing bad guys, Jin becomes more and more of a force of nature, less a man holding a sword, and more a sword holding a man. The game trades going off-the-cuff multiple combat methods and a release. The other games I'm describing might trend away from that for the focus of traditional swordsmanship and savviness. It's awesome, it's satisfying, and it certainly means you'll be relying on more than just a katana by the end. Ghost of Tsushima also gives you the respect you deserve by letting you go into one-on-one boss battles and enemy camps where you call out the bad guys and constantly rock their shit, all in cinematic slow motion. You get to feel like a badass, not just because you murdered 30 dudes at a camp, but because you're winning the narrative. You're steady in the island, like everybody's just blundering around. You're winning against insurmountable odds by being exactly who you are. You're surviving with whatever you have on hand, and you're never left weaker than you were before. At number 8, we have Bayonetta 2. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best solutions. If you want to feel like a boss, be a boss. At least that's the attitude Bayonetta takes. The over-the-top madness of the franchise is one where you proudly play as a witch clad in her own hair, which is a little stranger than the mass appeal of the game might suggest. I mean, that's the premise for the character, no joke. And it's big, bosses all the way from the start before you even get control, and all the way through the end. You're vying for the closest to the gates of heaven in the first game, then you're in the grossest interior of Inferno in the sequel. They're some of the biggest environments and most impressive set pieces in any game I've ever played. Bayonetta just takes that idea of style and makes it the center point of the game, letting you play a boss with all the elegance and poise, with nothing held back in a way we don't really see often. Sometimes, some of the games that I talked about kind of make you feel like you're cheating the conception of a boss, but Bayonetta is the idea of an unkillable boss who the player gets to control. It's written all over on the face of the game. Like, by the sequel, you can stomp on enemies, unzip dimensions with a whip, and give bosses those super black hole bowling attack things, with the silliness of an adventure game that's carefully designed challenges. Let's be clear. It's meant to be hard. Honestly, I don't know how they managed to make Bayonetta 2 both killer and easier than the first game, while still making you feel as much of a boss as ever. That's actually another idea for another list. Boss games that you can lose, but we're not there right now. Coming in at number 7, it's Marvel's Spider-Man 2. This might be a little high for one of the games where you feel boss right out the gate, but in my opinion, the feeling of being a boss in this game might be the most present in just about any game I've ever played. If there's anything as universal in appeal as just flying around freely through an open world version of Manhattan, with all the momentum and focus the latest Spider-Man games do so well at simulating, I can't think of it. It's one of those games where simply playing it the intended way makes you feel awesome. And then they keep rewarding you for staying in the intended lane with more and more cool stuff to do, and look cooler doing it. I mean, there's not really a moment in Spider-Man 2 where I didn't feel good playing it, and it wasn't just your symbiote powers coming in clutch by the end. Your new web wings make your flight that much more of a boss sensation. Like, if you play one of these games and don't feel overpowered, I'm sorry, but I don't know what's available for you. You might note Spider-Man 2 is the only game from the series that I'm putting this list because the other games do make you feel like a badass, but this is the best one. This is the one I most feel like a boss end to end. So, yeah. Next up at number 6, we have Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon. Listen, From Software makes really hard games that make you feel really weak, helpless, on your own playthrough. It's seriously hard to imagine any Soulsborne games ever letting you feel like a boss, at least on the first playthrough. Even when you beat those games, you don't necessarily feel like a boss, you just feel relieved, like the punishment part is over. But there is an exception, and that's Armored Core in so many ways. It's as equally exciting as it is punishing, and it's not nearly as brutal of an intro as its more blatant Souls cousins. Mech games have always let players be the bosses. They're some of the best excuses to come up with absurd weapons like mini nuclear missile launchers, flamethrowers on one hand and chainsaws on the other. But Armored Core 6 is probably the best game for letting you be a boss. Not only is the mech customization pretty accessible compared to previous games, the movement of these things is significantly overhauled, engineered to be stylish at any given time. The learning curve is steep, but technologically way less complex than figuring out how to whiff dodge an enemy's attack and kill him. Pretty much all of Armored Core 6 is a blast to play, and you'll feel like a boss right out the gate. You just get bigger and better weapons until the end of the game, where you get into what feels an awful lot like your endgame builds in the Dark Souls games. You're finally free of the oppressive, nightmarish, grounded reality and fetishism that surrounds some of the other Souls games. It's a lot more loosey-goosey and fun. Next on the list, we have God of War 3. Can't have a list about being a boss without including a God of War game. It's legally not allowed. You can't talk about the game where you kill Zeus and Artemis on the same afternoon without one. I had to be careful. The earlier God of War games, don't get me wrong, they're still boss games. But it's the third one of the original trilogy where you tear the entire pantheon apart in a wrath-fueled rage. That is the biggest, most boss energy possible. And the violent bloodshed is unchecked, unrestrained. There's no moral reason why you probably cut that guy's head off. It's just what you do. You're Kratos. You're here just kind of being mad at everybody and getting revenge or something. And to do that, you kind of have to just kill everyone. Even the semi-innocent people who are not necessarily getting in your way, but might maybe someday in the future or whatever. God of War goes ham when it comes to the graphics and the absolutely ludicrous nature of the entire situation, making you feel like a boss when actually doing the downward slicing and the making sure Zeus can't feel his toes anymore type stuff on Olympus. You're not just the boss in that game where you're running around naked and really damn angry. You're the unkillable force at the start, and the only thing that can stop you is you in a QuickTime event. Otherwise, the camera has to pan away because it's afraid what we might see next, with an even more grotesque and graphic look behind the curtain at where somebody who is very mad at you is walking towards. Next at number 4, we have Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. Now, if you've heard of Sekiro, you know it's probably the hardest game on this list by an order of magnitude. And right up until you get good, you don't feel anywhere in the ballpark of being a boss. The full garden variety enemies will completely own you until you learn the parry system. That's the extent of my advice for you. There are people who are way better at this game than I am. But once you do, once you beat bosses, you feel like an absolute threat that cannot be stopped. You become essentially Keanu Reeves and John Wick, except you're that rare beast in video games who will close more doors before they start killing people. Sekiro's brutal difficulty eventually teaches me how to take the hits that make bosses bleed and keep them bleeding, but Sekiro himself rarely loses control of the situation. It's one of the rare games where the main character is on the ground, pantsing the boss in every cutscene. The lone wolf is here to unapproachably rip through everyone with little hesitation. He has just about one emotion, and that's boss. The only time Sekiro doesn't feel like an unstoppable boss is during the boss fights, but the game's difficulty makes actually beating them all the sweeter and more satisfying. Coming in next at number 3, it's Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Now, you can't have a boss list without talking about one of the earlier games, and one of the best examples of playing as a boss character, and the only entry in the Metal Gear franchise. You play as Raiden, previously one of the most pointless prosthetics in all video games and the second most hated protagonist in the series. But Revengeance is a spin-off that embraces how silly the whole MGS world is by cranking it up even more to absurdity, and an absolutely banging soundtrack. You're not Snake sneaking around in a box, you're Raiden slicing people up and eating their juices for the special powers. There's nothing even remotely a threat to an extremely boring guy like me playing the game. You're not just walking away after finishing your helicopter, blowing up Snake Man in his suit with nanomachines while he's yelling here and have some stuff become the wind or whatever. The plot makes no sense, the game itself kinda barely holds together at times, and I love it. Metal Gear Rising is one of my most favorite boss games because there's something so soullessly fun about everything in it. It's designed like a square but plays like a perfect circle, and I genuinely can't say enough good about it. It's one of the few games that truly nails the intersection between combat, character, and conceit. Even when you realize the game is actually kind of short, and you pretty much go from one boss fight to the next.
Take this!
Next up, we have Asura's Wrath. So we're nearing the end, so it was about time we talked about one of the biggest bosses in video game history. And I do mean literally big here. Asura's Wrath is a game filled with so much rage and excitement and QuickTime events that it kind of bowls over into the real world, making a competition between Controller Man and Television Man very intense. Asura is a character who literally gets impaled on the planet and is so angry that he not only survives but also manages to angrily kill the man attacking him single-handedly. And that's the tutorial phase of the game, before any of the story even starts. Asura's Wrath is a game designed to make an angry, powerful, chaotic force for you to take control of as a player, but it even pushes it in every possible direction, even having him nonsensically punch things with his arms and add extra QTEs to finish off bosses and stuff. It's a weird game, but it is also a satisfyingly weird game. You will have to actually forcibly drag your boss powers out of him as you get your arms chopped off for trying to break his arms and destroy everything that stands in your way. But you will get your revenge and cathartic conclusion as they desperately try to hide their shake weave under a dodged halo. Listen, look, it's not a smart game, but it is very boss and very fast and very, very, very angry. Finally, at number 1, of course we're gonna have a Devil May Cry here. I don't care if I put the shotgun before the sword. This is the series that first comes to mind every time being a boss is a conversation, and Devil May Cry 5 is the ultimate expression of that, not necessarily original idea. We're killing demons, looking awesome, basically a whole game designed to make you feel overpowered and super cool. It's one of the few times you'll be playing a hero, doing good, and still play like a complete boss. The 3 protagonists are all fascinatingly well designed bosses to play, each with their own unique powers and abilities that make killing even the smallest of fries look crazy and feel like probably the coolest thing you could possibly do, no matter what you master. It is a satisfying game, a fun game, and a strangely beautiful looking game, which you kind of have to get used to means fighting enemies while living in a completely destroyed city. Devil May Cry 5 takes the boss energy of previous entries, gothic ridiculous aesthetic, and cranks it up with gameplay. The entire point of the franchise is style. Making you look good means getting good, but getting good makes you feel like the boss's boss. Meaning, if a boss shows up, now there's 2 bosses. Except for, you're gonna kill one of those bosses, which is the one that showed up as the boss. But sometimes, you know, it's good to be the boss. And sometimes it's good to really take it to somebody who was impressed into boss service by the actions of some other guy who's doing things that are not boss things. So yeah,